All right, wonderful. Well, thank you, Justin. And I guess I'll start sharing my screen. Perhaps one question before I start is there anyone amongst us who has been doing anything with the server admin API? And if so, I'd be curious for how it's been used. And if not, then I guess we'll be looking at the introduction together. So just trying to check if I see
We
anything
have,
or from the chat.
I think, Derek, you've done a bit with the admin API. We have a couple of internal tools that touch it. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so we've been using it for quite some time. When we do our server maintenance for our clients, we use the admin API to, get all the information about their current version of FileMaker server, the plugins they have installed. So we use that to create a nice little document we send to them when we complete our server maintenance.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Something
Very
that we
good.
don't do, and I think we're interested in learning about from you, is using the admin API to actually almost replace the admin console, which I know I don't want to spoil, but I know that's a potential opportunity.
Well, I've been using the admin API from Soliant, and it's wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, the admin API is from Claris, but Soliant has
Right.
published
You know what
a
I
demo
mean.
file,
Right.
and yes, we'll be looking into that very demo file today together. So I have some slides and mostly just so I remember what to say during the presentation, but I think most of it is going to be outside of the slide deck. So if we just look at this together. So yeah, the admin API meant for us to be able to manage our server or servers without having to go into the GUI of the admin console. So for those who may not know me, I'm Robert, and I like doing FileMaker stuff for some time now. And I also like being lazy, lazy in the good way, not the bad way, the way where you try to get more efficient so you're not working on things that are wasting your time. And APIs fit right in for that type of thing. So main objective, okay, well, just wanting to look a little bit at what the API has to offer, discuss the possible use cases that we could put in place, and then also look into possible gotchas or things you need to be aware of before sinking your teeth into that. So for today, it's going to be short and sweet. We're going to look at the actual demo file, and then we're going to discuss, like we said, the possible ways to use this. And we're also going to close into looking at the documentation and things to know that may or may not be documented. So being boring may not sound like something people would say, hey, that's a great thing. But technically, Claris has been saying they they actually want server to be boring. They want it to be boring because they want it to just work, in the set it and forget it kind of way. So I think there's a nice opportunity, if we may say, to get the server to be even more boring in a way where we see less and less of the GUI console. We are interacting less in a manual fashion, and we try to automate more and more the things that we have to do or to delegate them. So one way or another, a way for things to be even more boring, and getting less phone calls and all those things. So All right. So as I said just before we started, we will be looking at the demo file that Soliant has been doing together. So a big thank you to Soliant and more especially to Mike Duncan, who's been updating the that tool with the successing releases of FileMaker server and the changes to the API. So what we'll do here, and there's a obvious link to the to where that tool can be obtained. So I'll go right to the source and download this.
Robert, would you mind
Yes.
sharing that code or the link with the in the chat so that everybody else can?
Absolutely, I can put that in the chat right away. And here we go.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, like I said, I'll be downloading a fresh copy and going from that. Okay. And while I'm in my browser, we're just going to see quickly. I have a VM running on my machine, and that VM is running FileMaker server. So I have this here. It's not secure because there's no certificate, but the rest is pretty much what we know and love or don't love about the console itself. So nothing much here. And the admin API reference that comes from the server itself. Okay. So sorry about that. So yeah, once we've downloaded the tool, I'm just gonna quickly copy my my IP because I will need this once inside. So we'll go to the downloads and unpack this thing here, and there's a license. So it's licensed under the MIT license. So feel free to do anything with it. But if you repurpose this and start to publish it, well, the license should come along. And there's also a README that you can look into. And right now, what we're just going to do is open up the tool itself, and I'll see if I can just bring that back on my second desktop so we don't have too many things going on. If my screen resolution is an issue, I can change things. I can also zoom in just the tool itself. So just let me know one way or another.
Yeah, zooming in would probably be beneficial for us.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So is that's
better?
Somewhat good? Yeah. Okay. So before I start doing things in here, I will go to layout mode and look at the object for especially the license. So they have a slide control with many slides. And since I don't quite feel like publishing my my license information, I think I'll change this into concealed edit box. And I think with that, I should be good to go. So back to browse mode, I'm just creating a record. I'll be inserting the IP, okay? And there's two ways to authenticate. Usually the first time I'll authenticate before any of the other tokens have been generated, it'll be with just the admin console credentials, okay? So you can do something like that. And once we post that, we get a token back, okay? So if you do not want to use this, we're going to look at how to use the JSON web token for authentication. But right now we are authenticated. We are having our token, and it is valid for the next 15 minutes or the next 15 minutes after the last call we make to the API that uses this very token. Okay. So as we browse through, we see that the tool can use the API to pretty much read just about anything we would normally see in the console. We can also use it to change values because we see buttons here that are meant to send a patch request to the server. For things like even like, is the server running or stopped or all of those things. So a couple of things here with the public keys. We'll look, that's one of the things that we need to be customizing when we want to use the other authentication method. And then over here, we see the list of databases, the list of clients for any one database. You can click on it and get some more information, and each of them have options here that you could perform on the database. So you can open and close any file, and for any connected clients, you can interact with them by sending messages or disconnecting them. So pretty much the things we're accustomed to in the console itself. So again, here a list of clients or a list of schedules, settings for web publishing, for the data API, license. We said, okay, so I don't know. There's not much. I thought it would be bringing some more stuff. Perhaps it's dependent on if I pull the information one way or another. Notification settings for email and all of those things, external authentication, FileMaker client settings, OData, SSL. So, and the plugins, like what was mentioned earlier, we can get a list of plugins, and in this case, I don't have any plugins installed. So it is pretty extensive, and as part of the tool, you also have the links to the admin API guide and the admin API reference. So for the guide, it points to the published URL, and for the reference, it points to the link of this very server. So because it changes from server to server by version. I'm not too sure why Claris didn't decide to publish a web page where you could say, okay, well, show me the reference, and there's like a picker to get the server version, and then you get the matching API documentation. But anyhow, you can use those links to get to the documentation. So if we look at the authentication portion that we mentioned earlier, okay, one thing that is important is, like, after you're authenticated, the other calls will require the token to be sent along for them to succeed. Okay, so if I close that session by deleting the token, okay, and I say, okay, let's go into, say, database, and I try to interact with my files, you know, by saying, hey, I'd like to close this file, you know, and say, yeah, I don't want to send in any message, but I want to do this. Normally, well, not too sure what happened here, because I don't have a session. So maybe there's something about the UI here where the
I think it just
file.
starts the session when you click on some of these things.
Oh yeah, you're right. So I got a token here. So that's the way this file is configured. But if the token was not getting sent for the call, then the call would fail. Okay. So something else to keep in mind is that you need to manage those tokens because there's a limited number of simultaneous sessions that you can have on the server. So if I was just to click post, at some point I would hit that number, and then the server would just reply back to me saying, hey, you've exhausted the resources. We're not issuing other tokens, and that's it. So something to keep in mind. So now that we are connected, if we go look at our public keys, so I can then say, okay, I'll add a public key. It's going to be a public key for my demo today. Okay. We're going to generate this here and post to create the API key. So now we have that API key. I didn't generate a web token. So the JSON web token by default will expire after 365 days. So if you want, you can make it shorter. You can make it also larger to a point. I don't think you can get to say 100,000, but I think like 80,000 should work, or something like that. So so then you can just take that value from the token and dismiss the window here and get back to the authentication. Okay. And say, okay, now I want to authenticate with my JSON web token. Okay. And I'm even going to wipe away those credentials. Okay. And say, now let's delete that token, and we're going to use this from now going forward. And if I say post, then I get a new token. And now I'm no longer relying on the username and password. Okay. So you could set different public keys and tie them with a different JSON web token, each having a different expiration, or depending on if you want to revoke access to a specific application or user, then you could do all of those things if you have multiple public keys, and all of those things we could see like on the server itself. If I go back to my so I just don't quite recall. I guess it's in either configuration or administration that those things are going to be. So here we go. So the server was there before, and then demo got created just today. And we see the information over here. So,
Robert,
so we're really, yes.
Like Steven's raising his hand. You may have a question.
Oh, yes, please. By all means.
Robert, what's in the external authentication tab there down towards the bottom? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So my understanding is it's a match with the external authentication settings that we have in the console to say, okay, are we using Active Directory? Are we using Amazon, Google, or Azure to have authentication? And it's asking for information that I would again assume that over here, if we were to say, hey, I want to configure my stuff for Amazon, it would ask us for somewhat the same information.
Okay, but it doesn't show a custom authentication. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you want to set up a different provider, I'm not sure the API would let you do that. And perhaps you'd have to customize that on the server itself. So you know more than I do on that topic. So
well, I will check with them about that. So not to worry.
Or perhaps the again, the tool that we're looking at here maybe could be requiring an update. So that's something we can look again into when looking at the API reference. All right. Okay, very good. So I'll be just going back to the slides. If there's other questions, we can come back in here and play with this as much as we want. I just want to make sure that I cover all my bases. So so yeah, we've got that that demo. So in terms of use cases, because okay, it can be sounding like a nice to have, but what should we actually do with it? So well, there's a lot that we can do, and I'm sure that if we brainstorm together, we could even add to the list that we have here. But some things that I could suggest here is to say, well, you can use it to pull data from servers and then validate that things are the way you expect. You know, especially if Claris was to issue new guidance and say, oh, we now recommend, I don't know, you know, for your cache size to be this much or that much or whatever, then it would be much easier to have this in a file that you can say, okay, let's look through our records and validate all of that, then have to manually log into each of the consoles to say, okay, is it the way we expect or not? Something else is you can use it to customize access to features that normally you wouldn't want any user to have access to the whole console and start, you know, disconnecting clients, closing down files and things like that. But perhaps you would want them to be able to trigger a backup because they're about to do an import that could mess up with their data, or any other thing you can think of. So I said here the defunct administrator group, but I'm not sure if they've been brought back or not in the server. But for sure, I think they were introduced and then removed, and I just don't know if they made their way back in the server or not. So something else that could be done is to schedule actions from like a centralized module, something that is not sitting on a given server. Let's just say you'd like all of the servers to be closed down and to restart on a given interval. Then you could have that centralized instead of have that be something that requires a local configuration on each of the servers. Something else that is also nice is to say, well, when we install a server or upgrade a server or redeploy on another machine, yeah, we get to save the schedules and then re-import them. But there's a slew of other settings that it's kind of painful having to write down what they are and then make sure that they're back the same way. So you could quite literally use that and say, okay, we're gonna save things the way they are. And then once you install on a new machine, you can say, okay, well, let's take this and roll it into that server and make sure that it checks all the boxes, you know. Something else that we can do also is to monitor some items and lock them. So I'm not suggesting to replace the server logs altogether, but for some items, sometimes it's not necessarily easy to either see them through the rest of the information that is in the logs, or sometimes you're just not going to have the kind of information that you want. You know, if we take, for instance, a server that would be running with concurrent connections, okay, well, on your concurrent connections, the server will let you know how many users you have at any point connected to the server during the day, but you're not going to be able to know, well, like what's the highest I was on that day, unless you quite literally scan through the whole log and say, oh, here is how many were connected at the same time. So you could use the API to say, okay, I'm going to be looking at information and say, okay, I have this high water mark where we were at, I don't know, 27 users or something like that, and based on that, you can know, okay, should you be getting more of the concurrent licenses, or should you try and see that the usage would be more spread out through the time? So different things like that. Something else would be to quite plainly give control to users over some items like running schedules, stopping clients, opening or closing files. Basically, what I'm saying here is avoiding phone calls. And I've actually used this in one instance where there was a script that was not of mine design, but was tied to a schedule, and the schedule every now and then would just hang. And then the customer would call me and say, hey, I'm not getting my updates. And I would have to go on the server and then you know, just look, okay, is it because the record is locked? Is it because this or that? Or is it because the schedule is actually hung? And if that was the case, then I would just dismiss the running schedule and start it over. But so using the API, I was able to say, okay, we're going to have this little screen that you can just summon and say, okay, is it running? Yes or no. And if it is running and you want to kill it, then they get to do so. So that's fewer phone calls, fewer emails on my end, and I'm happy about it. The customer is happy about it. So a win-win. And also, we have another use case where we say we can create a schedule without having to pick the script from an endless drop down. So just a little nudge to the console. Earlier I said the things we like about it, the things we don't like, and sure thing. One of the things I do not like about the console today is when we have to define a new schedule and select the script from the list of existing scripts in a file. That picker is really oftentimes overwhelming and not fun to be dealing with. So you could design your schedules in a different way, but that's perhaps a little bit more in as a joke. So before we go to the next slide, for just again, would there be any other use case that that you see, or for the use cases that have been mentioned? Are there things that you're like, yeah, we should really be using this one way or another? Because I think it really depends on how many servers we're dealing with. For some customers, if they have a single server, most likely they're not going to go into that. So, and perhaps that's my segue for the next slide. So when we say who can benefit, well, anyone managing multiple servers, you know, so hosting providers or large customers that have more complex installs and deployments. Developers, and users, users if they are exposed to controls that otherwise they would not have access to, because we don't want them to be just logging into the console. So again, quickly here, covering a few things to know. So we saw there's two types of authentication. Okay, one is the basic one, and one is the with the JSON Web Token. So if you are, say, doing something where you are rolling this into a customer application that will let them interact with the console, I would encourage you not to rely on the basic authentication where you end up in one way or another putting your actual console credentials in the solution, even if it's as data, it would escape the a DDR, but still users could get to it one way or another. And I feel like a token that you can make sure that it expires, that you renew when you feel like renewing, all of those things. I feel like that's a better approach. And something else is, yeah, like we said, once you have the authentication done, you are receiving back a token, and that token you'll need to send it along for all of your other requests until it expires. And the token is valid for 15 minutes. So that basically the session is valid for 15 minutes, but 15 minutes following your last call. So if you were to do a call to the API every 30 seconds on that token, you could literally stretch the token to be used for hours at a time. But if you were to make a call and then wait 16 minutes after that, then that token would no longer be valid. You would need to re-authenticate to get a new token. So, and again, over here, we say that there's no more than 5 admin API sessions that can coexist at the same time. So there's a likeliness that you'll have to manage how the tokens are being issued and used and track their expiration. So there's a bit of work to be done there if you want to use that into your application. But all in all, it's not that hard to do and to achieve. And I think there's some great benefits there. One more thing I'll say here is coming directly from Wim de Kort. So he quite literally replied to me on the community because it was a thread. I forget what the thread was about, but he mentioned that there exists a config file on the server where some of those things can be customized, and so what we see here is quite literally coming straight from his post, and he says, don't change this on a running server, obviously, and test any changes carefully on a dev server. So, it's one thing to know the file exists. It's another one to say, okay, yeah, I'll go in there and I'm going to change, the session timeout, or I'm going to change how many like what's the maximum API sessions, and just start to monkey around with those things. So and yeah, this is just the capture, so we get an idea of what the file looks like. But I think personally I don't see a reason why, if you're managing the tokens properly, why you'd want to customize any of these things here. So
well, unless you have like a team of maybe like 20 people who would potentially be in a server, then you may want to increase that size of connections.
Yeah, but they'd have to be on the server at the same time,
Yeah.
and you could say, okay, well, I'll try to encapsulate their interactions into session and then dismiss the session once they're done, instead of, so there's a lot of ways where you could really maximize what you get from the sessions, even if you're only allowed like 5 to coexist. So yeah, and here we have the links to the API guide. The API guide is fairly there's not a ton of information in there. There's also some nuances in between things that you can do, say, with the FileMaker cloud that is offered by Claris. For instance, if we say perhaps getting a list of plugins or things like that, because plugins are not available on what Claris does, then perhaps those calls would just fail or error out or things like that. So, the reference is really per server. So if we go look at this before we open up the discussion. So I think here, so you have all of the calls for my server. You know, if your server is different because it's on another platform, I doubt there's a difference between Mac, Windows, and Linux. But clearly with cloud, we can expect that there would be something different. And if we go and look at external authentication over here and try to see the things we have here. So there's clearly calls that are designed specifically for some providers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. I'm just trying to see if there's something where, yeah, yeah, perhaps Mr. Blackwell, you'll have to check in with the people at Claris to see like if the admin API could be extended to target providers that are not from the short list that are embedded in the console. So, but you get the whole documentation there, like all of the calls, what's the method to use, what kind of reply you get from the server, if there's an error, or all of those things. So it's fairly consistent with what we're accustomed to when dealing with API documentation. So, and I think that may be a bit short, but in terms of content, that's pretty much what I have. But in terms of brainstorm, I'd be curious to know how people feel about this, what they like and don't like, and what they see themselves possibly using this for. So I'll stop sharing, but if there's anything else that we want to look at more closely, I can share my screen again.
One question I had.
Sorry, go ahead.
Does it jump more into the FMS admin capabilities, or is it really just replacement and add-ons for the actual console itself?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The command line. The command line. There's certain things you can only do in the command line with FM assist, FMS admin. Sorry, and I just was wondering if the API ventures into that territory where you can support those functions.
I see. You'd have to check. I'm not really an expert in knowing what are the distinctions in between what the command line lets you do that the API does not, or vice versa. I believe there are some discrepancies, and I think Claris is aware of those. I think recently there was a meetup where I'm not sure if it was Clay Makel or Rick Kalman, but they've hinted that they were going to be looking into this and trying to harmonize what is available from the different tools we have to interact with the server, because there's no reason that anything would be different. You know,
Yeah,
basically,
the
I
command
think,
line is in its own little world. Yeah, and it's not 100%
yeah.
clear what overlaps and what is only available in the command line. But I know there are several functions that are only in there, I believe.
Mhm.
Robert, I noticed in the file, and I'm not sure if you dived into this at all, that there's also, you can click the data API and also connect to the database via the data API and probably run a number of functions there. Have you touched that area?
I know that the demo file is meant to be a demo for API integrations, and they're using both the server admin API and the data API. I have not played with what they've packaged into that file to address the data API.
It seems like this could be kind of a full purpose API connecting to FileMaker tool.
I mean, it covers a lot of ground, that's for sure. And at the same time, I would say, like, the demo itself is, to my understanding, is somewhat tightly coupled with what is present on the screen and things like that. Like when I started doing my deployment for that other customer, where I said, hey, I want to know if the schedule is running, and if so, I need to disconnect the client running the schedule. I didn't reuse what was there. I crafted the same calls, you know, in the other solution, and basically worked my way from there. So I don't know if it's because I have a different coding approach, or I just felt like going that route with it. But if someone was to say, hey, I need to do something where the demo file would be like the basis for interactions, then yeah, you can repurpose that and get an amazing running start on anything you would want to do.
Cool.
So, but like I said, I don't think that file, like we saw, you know, when the token is absent, it tries to re-authenticate. But I don't think it tries to manage, for instance, the expiration all that much. I didn't try to wait for 15 minutes until, you know, to see is it going to dismiss it and then request a new one if the thing is written, or are the new calls also updating the token expiration. So I didn't pay close attention to any of that, just because to me it was just like the eye opener to say, okay, there's this that's possible. Here is how to authenticate. Here are the things to deal with, like in my mind, more like a one-time setup. Like I use the demo file to create the JSON web token that I would use, and to create the API key. But after that was done, you know, I really stopped relying on the demo file, and then said, okay, well, if this is how we need to authenticate, then I'm gonna have my own authentication calls and my own calls to list the schedules, get the status, and list the clients, and say, okay, well, if this one, you know, is the one that is running the schedule, then have a call to disconnect that that one client. So so yeah, but for some other people, and I'm mostly thinking of anyone who's in like hosting and things like that. You could quite literally just line up all of your servers and know just about all of the config into this one file, you know, and you can back this up and know if it has changed or not changed or all of those things, you know, and say, okay, you want the config the way it was on date X, well, here it is. So there's yeah, there's a lot of things there that I think are interesting to look into for people that do have the either the volume or the use case for, like I said, wanting a users to have this narrow path to control things, and not others.
Well,
I'm just thinking of how many times, you know, I took snapshots of the different tabs in the admin console to say, okay, we're going to migrate and wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. And it feels just so error prone. And with something like this, like I feel way more confident into knowing what I have to know and being able to replicate the things I need to replicate. Of course, like if we take things like the server, the database folders, you know, and the ability to have another folder. Like if you make your call, and the folder does not exist, it's not going to create the folder for you. But still, like if you have like a matching setup and you need to have the exact same settings in the console, like the API is really the way to go as far as I'm concerned. And again, kudos to the folks at Soliant, because I think having resources like something like this available and freely available for anyone to just peek under the hood, start tearing things down, and say, okay, well, this is, yeah, interesting, and this I can quite literally take this piece and move it over here and have it work for me. Um, that's great. I mean, it's awesome for the whole community.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people that use it. I mean, it's a good tool. One of the things that you showed, by the way, I just wanted to comment, was that I thought that ability to do the reference tracking, like if you've got you know, if you're trying to track maximum connections to the server and you can leave it tracking data, that's a really useful feature. It's really very valuable, because otherwise you might not know. And you know, if you're trying to manage your licensing, understanding that would be really helpful. It's kind of cool feature.
Yeah, I've been in that very situation. I don't know if you remember, but it was the somewhat early days of COVID, and there was a customer. They were into education, and they needed to have this like registration form for visitors. So they used WebDirect, you know, and but they just had so many licenses. They couldn't really roll out a site license for the whole school. So they needed to basically have this awareness of, well, do we need more license, or yes or no, you know? And the thing is that type of use is not linear, you know. It's not dependent on, okay, when do you have staff or not, or whatever. You can have like a bus coming in, and all of a sudden you have this peak of traffic, and then it's flat for um, a whole period, and so yeah, it was a bit like seeing the logs and knowing that, okay, there's this many there, this many there, it was not all that useful. You know, it would have been more useful to say, okay, give me the maximum number of connection we were at any given point in time for the whole day and reset every night or something like that. So that baked in the box of FileMaker server, you're not having any of that. But a tool like the admin API, again, when I was doing the slides, it's not like I made sure that I went in the API to see, okay, are all of each of those use cases something I'd be able to craft with what's in there. But I remain convinced that everything is in the toolbox for us to achieve that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you'd probably have to do something to keep the token alive, I would think, but it's a kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, well, if you poll every 15 minutes, then
It's going to be
can
alive
reuse the same token
yeah,
the whole
definitely.
day.
Exactly. No, it's very cool. Very cool. Thank you. That was really helpful. Like a lot of good information.
Yeah, and for a case like this, you would want to poll somewhat frequently, because the server is only going to give you the reading, you know, as of that very moment, and not anything like since your last connection or things like that. So yeah,
Gives you a way to script it and just have it running in the background and observing the server. It's a really useful concept.
Yeah, but at the same time, like I said, I'm not sure I would start and do something that would log, you know, or replicate things that are already logged. So there's something to watch there, because I mean, it is a request. Like it's not like free to get. So I wouldn't be pulling that down every second. But yeah, if you space things out, and as far as I'm concerned, you know, if you have a reading every 5 minutes, you're good to go. So I hardly see how that could be problematic on the on any server. So yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, Robert, thank you very much. As always, this was really great and informative, and I think those of us who have not used this tool in the past will begin using it now. Before we close out the session, are there any other topics or items that anybody wanted to bring up and discuss?
Is there like a date for next month?
We normally do the third Wednesday of the month. So looking for October 4/11, it'll be the 18th. So you can either do the 18th or, you know, the 25th. I'm not sure if anybody has any preferences between those two dates. Otherwise, we can just go with the 18th. And also definitely open if anybody on the call has a recommendation for a topic or presentation for next month. Otherwise, we'll go and reach out to our collection of people who like to present. Lazarus, did you have something?
No, but as you said earlier, FileMaker is coming up with an update. So let's see what they got. It could be a topic for next month.
Yep, that's possible. I guess it depends on the nature of the update. If it has a lot of new things, then yeah, we can definitely pull up the white sheets on it and go through the new features. So we can play that by ear. Otherwise,
have you guys been briefed on any of the new updates? Any information? You know, just to get us salivating here.
John, do you have? I haven't looked at. I was just made aware of it by John a little bit ago. I'm not
Okay.
sure. If there's
Yeah,
any-
no, I only have a generally that they are working on a new release. That's all I know. I don't have any details of the specifics. They're trying to increase connectivity, and they've been sort of announced that in the past, and so I assume it's progress along that road. The coordination of the platform and improving the usability with Claris Connect. But I don't know any details.
Yeah. Also, I was on a meeting, I think from the meetup called FM Bug from the UK,
Yep.
where Doug Willis was there, and one thing that he mentioned, actually showed during the call, was something where they were working on layout-based calculations, so something where you could just have a text box like you have for just about any label, okay, but instead of inputting only merge fields and merge variables, then you could quite literally have something that brings open the calculation dialog and define your calculation in the layout, without having to rely on the
Is this
schema to
for
say.
short term or long term? Like, when I grow up, I'd like to be an astronaut. Is that along the same line?
No,
Well, he showed something that was working, so I'm assuming that's something we could get somewhat soon. And again, some people will say, well, we already kind of have that in one way with the button bars,
Yeah, but they still haven't put the calculation engine in the buttons. I mean, let's start with that one first.
Yeah, but
The
I
little
doubt
things.
that they will be revisiting older components, but that's
Yeah,
that's a different topic for a different
there's a lot of
discussion.
stuff that doesn't make sense, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be a topic. What doesn't make sense with Claris FileMaker?
Let's all bash on FileMaker.
Well, it's just those things were
presently
developed.
Go ahead.
Those
Robert.
things were developed at different point in time, and like button bars were introduced. It's a new object, so in there they can throw in any feature they want. But if they start touching older objects, they have to start caring about like backward compatibility and a bunch of things that can get a bit hairy. So I do understand that there are things where we're looking at obvious discrepancies in between different objects or types of controls that we have. But I also understand why Claris is reluctant to open that can of worms and
legacy
start
code
changing. Yeah.
It's a major challenge for them because they have to make sure that you can continue to upgrade your version of FileMaker and not have to actually edit any of the code and have it all work. So I definitely understand the whole idea of backward.
Yeah, but in order to move forward, you have to say somewhere that, all right, there's a cutoff thing in order to make advances in big strides, let's say. You have to say, okay, from here on, that is not supported, or the older version is not supported anymore. Otherwise, you're gonna
There's
go
been
round and round.
very few of that, and every time something like that happens, there's a fair bit of pushback.
Yes,
so
there is. Yes, there is. And that's why we're still at FMP 12, because they don't want to move to something else or something different.
Right.
Well, I think people having gone through the migration from FMP 5 to FMP 7 and then FMP 7 to FMP 12, a good number of them are not necessarily hoping or seeking a file format change. I think every time they announce a new release, the one question that pops up early on from the community is, will there be a file format change? Because if that's the case, it's a whole different story. And if we talk about deprecation, there's been things that have been deprecated, but they've been either replaced with something completely different, or they've been just not replaced, like runtimes and things like that. So yeah, there's this space where I think they acknowledge that some of what we're dealing with can be dated, but in terms of where they're going to put the efforts, I think, especially in the context where they're introducing newer products that they want a better integration in between all of the things that are in the lineup,
Platform.
Yeah, I doubt they will be spending much time putting on that kind of polish on the things that have been part of the platform for ages, so to speak.
Yeah, I must say I'm personally more excited with the platform integration components that they're working on. I think those offer a lot more for us than some of the details. I mean, there are definitely areas of the user interface and controls that could be improved, but they're already a lot better than they used to be. And I'd love to see them continue to put their effort into, more platform, more web compatibility, make it easier to, make the platform more extensible into the web.
Which is fine, but if they don't give you the tools to do that, if they don't work on the scripting interface, make it a little better, if they don't work on the user interface a little better, it's not going to move forward. People are not going to pick up on those new things. It's going to make it difficult. If you look at FileMaker, the way you script on FileMaker and the way you script on other platforms, it's like day and night.
What specifically kind of bugs you?
I don't have a specific issue to talk about right now, but it could be, as I said, a subject we can further discuss. Like what bugs you, what do you not like? I don't have a list of issues right now, but I'm just talking about an overall impression.
I've always been very glass half full, and I find that what I can do in today's FileMaker compared to what I could do 5 years ago is just so much improved.
Right, but I'm not stopping at what I can do with today's FileMaker and the old FileMaker. I'm trying to look at the global picture. If you want FileMaker to succeed as a tool for more users, more businesses, more this, more that, you have to expand it. You have to catch up with the rest of the world.
Isn't that I would say that platform integration's about, though? I mean, hopefully that's what it is, that's what they're trying to do with
which is positive. It's positive, but then the interface has to give you the tools to match the way other applications, let's say, integrate with other platforms, how the whole thing works. You have to have the tools. It's nice doing that, but give me the tools to do that.
Yeah, there's definitely still a pretty big hole that has to be filled there, but I like the direction, and hopefully the holes will continue to get filled.
Yeah, I think my main concern with those things is really when we think of newcomers to the platform, because for us, we understand those differences and those discrepancies. We know that, okay, the tab control was there way before we ever had the slide control, and that they behave slightly different, and so on and so on. But for someone who knows nothing about FileMaker and picks up the platform today, they're coming into this, and even just for learning purposes, there's discrepancies there that must be making things a bit harder than what they ought to be.
That's a really good point. Maybe that's something we should talk about. What are the things that are the barriers to a new user that that just sort of seem to be in the way? I think I think that's a really interesting point. Because clearly it's in all of our interest to have FileMaker grow the market, and if there's stuff that's sort of in the way of that, I think that's, it would, you know, also, also good feedback to provide them, you know.
Yeah,
for-
it's just, it's difficult for us because we don't have those like fresh eyes, you know, it's not like
True, that's true. We
so
see it.
it's, yeah, the way to see it is when you start teaching FileMaker to someone else, all of those things, they
All
pop
those.
up, you know, it's, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we actually have
And-
someone new starting in a couple of weeks, so maybe we'll have an opportunity to learn some of that. So they, yeah, it's like debugging your own code, right? You you need a fresh set of eyes.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, again, thank you. Justin, is there anything else? We're
Nope, I think we're good to go.
awesome.
All right, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you all next month.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Robert.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take care.